David lay still in bed, his breathing slow and measured, his body sinking into the mattress. His wife, Jessica, had no idea he was awake. She lay beside him, her back turned, her phone gripped tightly in one hand. The dim glow of the screen flickered against the wall, casting soft shadows that danced with every tiny movement she made. Then he heard it. There's some one last night before I leave him. David felt his pulse hammer in his ears, his fingers curled into the sheets. But he forced himself to stay motionless, to breathe evenly, to remain the man she believed she could deceive. Jessica exhaled a quiet laugh, the kind meant only for her secret audience on the other end of the call. I know, right? He's been so clueless this whole time. He actually thinks I'm upset about the marriage. A pause, a smirk in her voice. No, Ryan, you'll be my grand finale. Tomorrow night, one last night of fun before I finally walk away. A lump formed in David's throat, thick and cold. The betrayal wasn't just in her words, it was in the ease with which she spoke them, the casual cruelty dripping from her tone. She wasn't just cheating, she was savoring it. His mind moved fast, cataloging every detail. Tomorrow night, one last time. Ryan, David almost laughed to himself. Jessica believed she was the one in control. She had no idea that her final night of triumph would be the night she lost everything. The next morning, David played his role to perfection. And Jessica rolled over in bed, stretching like a satisfied cat, her expression serene. Morning, she murmured, placing a lazy kiss on his cheek. Sleep well? David gave a small, tired chuckle, like a rock. She had no idea. At breakfast, he sipped his coffee, watching her scroll through her phone, probably finalizing the details of her little rendezvous. She tossed her hair over one shoulder, the silk robe slipping slightly, revealing the smooth curve of her collarbone. You working late again tonight? She asked, voice casual. David nodded, keeping his face carefully neutral. Yeah. Some extra reports came in last minute. Should be a late one. She gave an exaggerated pout. Poor baby. David swallowed down the bitterness rising in his throat. He smiled at her instead, just as he always had. I'll make it up to you this weekend. Maybe a little getaway? Jessica brightened. Ooh, now that's an idea. Somewhere with a spa. She was already thinking of her future, already imagining a life where David was just a memory, a mistake to be corrected. He took another sip of coffee, his grip steady. Yes, a little getaway. That sounded perfect. Because after tonight, Jessica would need one. That night, David made his move. The moment Jessica left the house, he followed. Not too close, not too far. He had already done his research. He knew the hotel. He knew the room number. But there was one detail she didn't expect. Ryan wasn't going to be there. David had seen to that. And when Jessica walked through that door, expecting her lover, she would find only him. Wait and calm. Holding the divorce papers, David had never considered himself a vengeful man. He believed in fairness, in patience, in letting people reveal their true selves over time. But now, as he sat alone in his study, fingers steepled under his chin, he realized something. Jessica had underestimated him. She thought he was blind, that he was weak, that he would just quietly fade into the background while she slipped away into her new life, leaving behind a shattered marriage and a humiliated husband. No, he wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of breaking him. Instead, he would give her exactly what she deserved, a reckoning so precise that she wouldn't see it coming until it was too late. His plan had already been set in motion. That morning, after Jessica left for work, he had taken action. First, he had called the hotel, speaking to a manager under the guise of confirming a special reservation for Ryan. A subtle slip of cash ensured that Ryan's name would be flagged on arrival. Except Ryan wouldn't be arriving at all. Then David had sent a message. Using a throwaway phone, he had texted Ryan, pretending to be Jessica. Change of plans. Meet me at a different hotel, room 712. I can't wait. A simple bait and swing. Brian, being the careless, overconfident type, wouldn't question it. He'd show up to the wrong hotel, wait like an idiot, and Jessica would be left alone in the room meant for their final night. Alone with David. Now as the sun dipped below the horizon and the time drew near, David felt a strange calm settle over him. He wasn't nervous. If anything, he was looking forward to seeing the look on Jessica's face when she realized she had walked into her own downfall. At 8:30 p.m., Jessica was dressed to impress. David watched from the living room as she checked herself in the hallway mirror, running a hand through her dark waves, adjusting the delicate necklace resting above her collarbone. She was glowing, her excitement barely contained beneath the mask of normalcy. She turned, catching him watching her. The big night? He asked casually, setting down his book. She smirked. Just dinner with some friends from work. You know how these things go. Wine, gossip, the usual. That was fun, he said, standing and stretching. I might turn in early. Long day. Jessica's lips curved into a knowing smile. She thought she had him wrapped around her finger. Thought he was completely oblivious. Don't wait up, she purred, leaning in to brush a kiss against his cheek. David forced himself to relax, to let the moment pass as if nothing had changed, as if he hadn't already planned the perfect storm waiting for her. He watched her leave, heard the click of her heels against the pavement outside, the soft hum of the engine as she drove away. Then slowly, he exhaled and grabbed his car keys. It was time. Jessica arrived at the hotel, her heart racing in anticipation. She took the elevator to the 10th floor, her heels clicking against the marble hallway as she made her way to room 1005. She knocked lightly, expecting Ryan to open the door with that cocky smirk of his, ready to indulge her one last time before she walked away from her marriage forever. The door swung open, her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't Ryan. David stood there, calm, collected, a quiet storm brewing in his eyes. For a moment, Jessica couldn't process what she was seeing. The color drained from her face. David, she stammered, stepping back, as if she could physically distance herself from the disaster unfolding before her. David stepped aside, gesturing toward the open door. Come in, Jessica. I think we have something to discuss. Her pulse pounded in her ears. This wasn't possible. Ryan was supposed to be here, not her husband, not the man she had so carefully lied to, manipulated, and taken for granted. She hesitated, but David's expression remained unreadable, his posture relaxed, almost amused, as if he was daring her to run. She didn't. With shaking hands, she stepped inside. The door clicked shut behind her, sealing her fate. Jessica stepped into the hotel room, her legs suddenly unsteady. The air inside felt heavier, suffocating. David closed the door behind her with a quiet click. That sound, small, almost insignificant, sent a wave of panic crashing through her. This wasn't supposed to happen. Her breath came shallow, her mind scrambling for an explanation, an escape route. Think, Jessica. Think fast. She turned to face him, forcing a smile, trying to play it off. David, she said, letting out a forced laugh. What are you doing here? David didn't answer right away. He took his time, moving toward the window, hands casually slipping into his pockets. From outside, the city pulsed with life. Cars honking, neon lights flickering, people moving about their night as if Jessica's entire world wasn't collapsing in slow motion. Finally, David turned to her. I could ask you the same thing. Jessica swallowed hard. I was meeting some friends for drinks, but she glanced toward the empty hotel bed, the perfectly set scene of her betrayal. Damn it! She needed to be smarter than this. David raised an eyebrow. Drinks? He took a slow step forward, his presence filling the space between them. At a hotel room, Jessica's mind raced. Lying was second nature to her, but David, he wasn't acting like a man who just stumbled upon a mistake. No, he was too calm, too composed. This wasn't a confrontation. It was an execution. I booked the room for privacy. She tried. We didn't want a crowded bar. It was just supposed to be a place to relax for a bit. David hummed, tilting his head, considering her words. Interesting. And tell me, Jessica, were Ryan and your friends planning on showing up? Because I have a feeling they won't be making it tonight. Jessica felt her stomach drop. There it was, the crack in her carefully crafted reality. David, she started, her voice faltering. I don't know what you think is going on, but David reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded stack of papers. Not just any papers. Jessica's throat tightened. The divorce papers. Her eyes darted to his face, searching for any sign of weakness, any hesitation. But David was unreadable, his features smooth, his body language completely in control. You were going to leave me, David said, his voice calm, even. That much I already knew. He held up the papers, watching her reaction. But you thought you'd get the last laugh, didn't you? One last fling before walking away like you'd won. Jessica's lips parted, but no words came. There was no point in denying it anymore. He knew. He had known for long enough to plan this. Her pulse pounded. She felt trapped, exposed, and for the first time in years, powerless. You don't understand, she whispered. David let out a quiet chuckle. No, Jessica, I understand perfectly. He placed the papers on the small glass table beside the armchair, then slowly took a seat, gesturing toward the second chair. Jessica hesitated. Sit, he repeated, voice firm, leaving no room for argument. With stiff movements, she obeyed, lowering herself into the chair opposite him. David leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. You've always been good at controlling situations, haven't you? Twisting things just enough to keep people where you want them. You thought you were in charge of this, that I'd never see it coming. He let the silence stretch, then added, But, Jessica, you forgot one important thing. She swallowed hard, barely able to form the question. What? David leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm smarter than you. Jessica's breath hitched. She had spent years believing she was the one manipulating him, the one with the upper hand. Now she saw how blind she had been. David straightened, his expression cold. You're going to sign those papers. Tonight. Right here. And then you're going to leave this room alone. Just like you'll be leaving our marriage. Jessica blinked, trying to process his words. And if I don't, David gave her a slow, knowing smile. Then I make sure everyone sees exactly who you are. Your family, your friends, your co-workers, everyone. Her blood turned to ice. Yep, I have everything, Jessica. The messages, the calls, proof that you planned this whole thing while smiling in my face. He let that settle before adding, Ryan, he's already blocked you. He got the message before you even left the house. Jessica's chest tightened. No, this couldn't be happening. She reached for her phone, fumbling to unlock it, her fingers shaking. She opened her messages, scrolling desperately. Right. She clicked his name, only to see message undelivered. Her breath came in short gasps as she checked her call log. Nothing. He was gone. David sat back, satisfied. It's funny, isn't it? He gestured to the room around them. You thought this night would be a victory. Instead, it's the night you lose everything. Jessica felt a tear slip down her cheek. Not out of remorse. She wasn't the type to regret her choices. But fear. That she felt now. I think you're punishing me, she whispered. David studied her for a moment. Then, ever so slightly, he shrugged. No, Jessica. I'm just letting you destroy yourself. He reached for the pen on the table and slid it toward her. Jessica's hands trembled as she picked up the pen, the reality of her situation finally crashing down around her. The game was over, and David, he had already won. Jessica sat frozen, the pen in her trembling fingers hovering just above the crisp white divorce papers. This couldn't be real. Everything had shifted so fast, too fast. Just hours ago, she had felt invincible, stepping into this hotel with the thrill of a final, secret rendezvous humming beneath her skin. Now, that confidence had been torn from her, ripped away in a moment she never saw coming. Her gaze flickered up to David, sitting across from her with the patience of a man who already knew how this would end. He had planned every detail, every move. And the worst part, she had never seen it coming. Jessica took a slow, shallow breath, buying herself a few extra seconds. Think, Jessica. Find a way out. You don't have to do this, she murmured, her voice softer now, laced with the pleading she had once used to get exactly what she wanted. We can talk about this. We can fix it. David only chuckled, shaking his head. Fix it? He echoed. Jessica, you didn't want to fix anything. You were ready to walk away the second you thought you could do better. She flinched. The words stung, not because they were untrue, but because he had stripped away her illusions with ruthless precision. Still, she had to try. Jessica set the pen down and reached across the table, her fingers grazing the back of his hand. David, she whispered, tilting her head just slightly, her voice slipping into that honeyed tone she knew once made him weak. I know I made mistakes, but you and we've built a life together. Don't throw it all away in anger. David didn't move, didn't even blink. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, his lips curling into something between amusement and pity. Jessica, he said, his voice calm, almost gentle. You don't get to manipulate me anymore. Her stomach clenched. For years, Jessica had held the upper hand in their marriage. She had been the one who dictated the terms, the one who decided when to soothe, when to withdraw, when to make David chase after her just enough to remind him of what he stood to lose. But tonight, that power was gone. She could see it in his eyes. There was no anger there, no sadness, no lingering love she could exploit, just detachment, cold, calculated detachment. Jessica swallowed hard, forcing a small, shaky laugh. Come on, David, she tried again. You don't have to humiliate me like this. I get it. I screwed up, but David leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Jessica, You still don't get it, do you? She went silent. You've already humiliated yourself. The words hit her like a slap. Jessica sat back, gripping the arms of the chair, her nails digging into the leather. The walls of the hotel room felt like they were closing in. This was real. This wasn't a game she could win. David took a sip from the glass of water on the table as if he had all the time in the world. You still think this is about me trying to hurt you, but I'm not here to punish you, Jessica. He gestured to the papers. I'm just here to finish what you started. Her throat was dry. She picked up the pen again, her fingers stiff, unwilling. Signing these papers meant losing everything, her security, her home, the comfort of knowing David would always be there, even if she didn't always appreciate him. It meant Ryan was gone, too. She hesitated. David sighed, glancing at his watch. You have about 5 minutes before I make good on my promise to expose you, he said matter-of-factly. I have everything queued up, messages, screenshots, recordings. By tomorrow morning, your friends, your family, even your job, he shrugged, they'll all know exactly who you are. Jessica's heart slammed against her ribs. She stared at him, desperate to find a crack in his resolve. But David was done. He had already won. Her fingers tightened around the pen. She had no choice. With a shaking breath, she pressed the tip to the paper and signed. The moment she lifted the pen, it felt like the last bit of control she had over her life was gone. David took the papers, flipping through them with a nod of approval. Then, without another word, he stood. Jessica blinked. That's it, she rasped. David glanced at her, his expression unreadable. That's it. She expected a final remark, some parting jab at her downfall. Instead, he simply gathered the papers, tucked them into his briefcase, and turned toward the door. For a brief, fleeting moment, Jessica felt terror, not of losing David, but of the emptiness his absence would leave behind. He wasn't giving her a grand, dramatic ending. He was just walking away. The door opened. Jessica lurched forward, reaching out. David. But he was already gone. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving Jessica alone in the hotel room she had ruined her life for. The weight of it all crashed down on her. She had nothing. No Ryan, no husband, no plan. She grabbed her phone, hands shaking as she pulled up Ryan's number. She dialed. Blocked. She tried again, same result. Her vision blurred as she scrolled through her messages, desperate for someone who would still take her side. But the truth had already started spreading. Her phone lit up with unread messages from friends, from colleagues, from people she hadn't spoken to in months. Is this true? Jessica, what the hell? Wow, you really did that? She let the phone slip from her fingers, staring blankly at the screen. David hadn't just taken her marriage. He had taken her illusion of control. And the worst part, she had handed it to him on a silver platter. Jessica sat motionless in the dimly lit hotel room, her world unraveling in real time. The phone slipped from her grasp, landing on the plush carpet with a soft thud. The screen still glowed, mocking her with unread messages. Each one, a nail in the coffin of her old life. She had lost. Her body felt weightless, as if she were floating above the wreckage of her own decisions. Her mind screamed for a solution, some way to claw back even a shred of control, but for the first time in her life, there was nothing left to manipulate. Ryan was gone. Her husband had outmaneuvered her. Her friends were already whispering. Jessica had built her world on arrogance, on the belief that she was untouchable. But David had just proved her so very wrong. A bitter laugh bubbled up in her throat. She had spent years looking down on him, believing him weak, predictable. Now, sitting in the ruins of her carefully laid plan, she finally saw him for what he truly was. Smarter, more patient, and far, far more dangerous than she had ever realized. The memory of his final expression haunted her. Not anger, not satisfaction, but indifference. He had simply walked away. No final outburst, no dramatic speech, no lingering hesitation. That was what hurt the most. David was done with her. He wasn't punishing her out of love or hatred. He had simply removed her from his life, efficiently and completely. And now she was alone. The air in the room was suffocating, thick with the scent of perfume and regret. Jessica stood unsteady on her feet and made her way to the mirror above the dresser. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her. Her makeup, once flawless, was smudged beneath her eyes. The confidence that had once radiated from her was gone, replaced by something she despised. Desperation. Her gaze fell to the divorce papers resting on the table. It was over. Officially. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her breathing. There was no going back. She needed a plan, a way forward. But deep down she knew nothing she did would ever undo this night. Her reputation, shattered. Her marriage, gone. Her carefully curated image of control, destroyed. She reached for her phone again but hesitated. Who could she even call? No one. For the first time in years, Jessica had no backup plan. She was truly, utterly on her own. The realization hit her like a fist to the gut. She turned away from the mirror, grabbed her coat, and walked to the door. The hotel room felt colder now, like a tomb. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out into the hallway, unsure of where to go next. But one thing was certain, David had won, and Jessica would spend the rest of her life paying the price.